All right, 8:15 on the program. This is a great honor to have this gentleman in studio with us. So, the first of 3 volumes, the book In Search of the Elusive Zimbabwean Dream, an autobiography of thought leadership, traces the leadership, thoughts and philosophical disposition of Professor Arthur Mutambara over a period of 35 years as his generation sought to become the transformation it wished to see in Zimbabwe. The trilogy also constitutes a fascinating intellectual and political journey by the man who would become Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe at the tender age of 42. The author, Professor Arthur Mutambara, joins us to talk more about his book. Sir, good morning. It is such a privilege to have you in studio with us.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with your viewers.
It's wonderful, and I was reading a couple of articles of the launch of this book when you eventually brought it out. You disappeared very much so from public life for quite some time. And then, with much fanfare, there was the release of this book, a glimpse into your private life that we never, ever got to see. What made you do this? Why did you write this book?
You know, the tragedy is that as Africans, we are not reading. Yeah. We have lost the reading culture. But more importantly, as Africans, we're not writing. We don't document our experiences. Yeah. So I felt rather than talk about it, let me walk the talk and put together a set of books that document the views, the thoughts, the activities of my generation. So the motivation really is to say Africans must be full participants in the construction of knowledge. Africans must write, Africans must read. Yeah. And I'm trying to walk the talk.
Yeah, which I love, because there was a great quote that said that Africans need to be the masters of our own narrative. As you just mentioned, we need to document our history, which is vitally important. You use examples of China, who go back thousands of years in documenting their history, and yet you talk about Africans that can't even go back 5 years. We find that difficult.
Every successful civilization has embraced the notion of documentation. Every successful civilization has a writing culture. The Chinese, the Indians, the Europeans, the Americans, they value the philosophy of documenting their experiences. Africans, we have a lot of oral history. And when we look at history, we have people like A.G.P. Taylor, with people like T.O. Ranger, with people like Beach. Where is Kumalo? Where is Ngomo? Where is Mandaza? Africans must become the authorities on their histories. Africans must be masters of their own narrative, even in the media. Yeah. The Africans must be telling this story. Indeed. Why? Because we know it better. And also remember, a page of history is worth 10 volumes of logic. Yeah. He who controls the past controls the future.
Amazing. I do love the way you put that. You even speak about you can't even find a pamphlet on Robert Mugabe.
And let me emphasize this.
And
I
that's
mean,
the
a pamphlet
reality.
written by Mugabe himself. Yeah? There are books written by others. Where is Robert Mugabe's own pamphlet? Robert Mugabe is very interesting. From 1960, when he joined the NDP, to today, he's at the front seat of African history, front seat of Zimbabwean history. There's not a single pamphlet written by him. Yeah. The travesty of justice. Yeah. What we're saying is, rather than criticize, I'm saying, here is how we do it.
Which is fascinating. It's a fascinating insight, and we can learn so much as we have from you. So let's delve a little bit deeper, because you have had a very fascinating life, and it starts from early childhood, even though you're still so young. So, but we'll get there. From your childhood days, and you talk a lot about the childhood, and you talk a lot about learning from examples of childhood. Talk to us about it. I mean, what was your childhood like?
You know, one thing we're emphasizing is that never mind the circumstances of your birth, you can succeed against all odds. I grew up in the village, looking after goats and, sheep in the village. And I went from there to University of Zimbabwe, to Oxford, being a Rhodes Scholar, to teaching at MIT, the top engineering school in the world. So I'm saying to young people, yes, there's poverty. Yes, life is not fair. Yeah. But with the support of family, with hard work, with Ubuntu, I am because we are. We are because I am. The extended family philosophy, which is a very African concept, is very useful to take people from poverty to stardom. So we're trying to motivate those who are unlucky in life, those who have gone into hard times, and say to them, never mind the circumstances of your birth. If you work hard with the support of your family, the extended family, with the support of the community, of the nation, we can make it. So I'm an example of Ubuntu. I'm an example of the power of the extended family philosophy. I'm an example of hard work. We're also emphasizing this balance, academic excellence and social responsibility. You don't impress me if all you do is academic work. You're number one in your class, you got a first class, and that's all you do.
Yeah.
You don't go to church, you don't sing in this choir, you don't play soccer, you're not a leader. You don't impress me. At the same time, if you're an activist, you are radical, you're making noises, and you're coming last in your class. You don't get your degree. Again, I'm not impressed. What I want to see, and I show it in the book, is the balance between academic excellence and revolutionary zeal.
Yeah.
Academic excellence and radicalism. Confrontation, revolution, and a first class.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. If there's one thing that stood out for me, it was that. And it speaks so much to not only what you are saying, but I mean, I think very much so what you're saying is echoing a lot into the youth of South Africa as well. When you said it's not enough to just be radical and political,
So
as you just
there's
said.
a danger. Many young people are radical, they're in the streets, they're talking tough. They're not doing well in school.
Yeah.
They're not setting up businesses.
Absolutely.
I want to see an entrepreneur. I want to see
Academic
run
excellence and social responsibility. You
balance.
emphasize
We need
that.
both. We need both. And that's how we become a successful civilization, when we embrace entrepreneurship, academic excellence, and also responsibility in this community, and also challenging the powers that be.
What made you go into politics? I mean, you are a professor in robotics, world-renowned professor in robotics, and yet, not that you didn't become a world-renowned leader, because you did in your own capacity, which we'll talk about. But what made you move into
Because
politics?
I'm trying to walk the talk. The robotics, the mechatronics, the engineering, that's academic excellence. Getting involved in the community, being political, running a country, that is social responsibility. So, in addition to writing the books in engineering, writing the journal papers in engineering, teaching at MIT, working for McKinsey and Company, and all those other interesting academic pursuits, I'm also trying to make a difference in my own community. Remember, Gandhi teaches us, be the change you seek to see in the world. Don't ask what others can do to bring about change. That's Kennedy now. But rather what you can do yourself in your own small way to make a difference. Again, my country has challenges. Africa has problems. So I have a duty and obligation to be a player, to be an activist, to make a difference in my country, to make a difference in Africa. By the way, the nation state is so yesterday. We must talk about SADC. We must talk about ECOWAS. We must talk about the free trade area. We must talk about the African continent. South Africa is very small. 55 million people is chicken change under globalization. South Africa will only make it if we approach the world as 1.1 billion Africans. So as I am active, I'm trying to say, what can we do together as Africans so we can succeed as a continent? No African is worthy of respect if there's a single African who's suffering, who's hungry, who's unemployed. So that's what drives me from rocket science to politics, to make a difference and make sure globally the Africans in America, so-called African Americans, are doing well. The Africans on the continent are doing well. Because my brand, my personal brand, my respect that I get will depend on whether the African has done well. The African American has done well. The Zimbabwean has done well. So I have a duty and obligation to be an activist, to bring about change in my community.
And you were an activist from a very young age. I mean, at university, you wrote one of the most unprecedented letters that actually led to the closure of the University of Zimbabwe. You were detained at that time. What has been your battle all along? I mean, that was in the 80s when there was independence. What were you hoping for then?
You see, the book shows the evolution of my thinking. When we were younger in high school, we defended the one-party state. We defended Mugabe's ZANU-PF one-party state. We were for socialism under one-party state. But as we grew wiser, as we got exposed to the failures and the excesses of the regime in Zimbabwe, we turned against it and said, no, we don't want a one-party state, we want a multi-party system. And that's when we got into trouble, when we were opposing corruption, opposing the one-party state as students. And of course, we were a generation that was trying to make a difference in our country. That's part of the story in the book. And then beyond that, we go to Oxford, we go to America. Again, we're still active. And now we're saying, what can we do together as Africans to improve the circumstances of Africans across the board, Zimbabwe included? So the Zimbabwean dream A peaceful, democratic, and prosperous Zimbabwe is about every African country. A peaceful, democratic, and prosperous African nation. The issues we address in the book affect South Africa. The National Development Plan, that's the national vision in this country. But we're saying it's not enough for it to be an ANC program. The National Plan for South Africa, the National Development Plan for South Africa, must be above party. The ANC must engage not only social partners and business, the political parties, so that when the EFF comes to power, they continue with the National Development Plan. So we are emphasizing that we must apply these ideas across countries.
Are you worried about South Africa? When you look at the political landscape we're in right now, and many people say we're following in the footsteps of Zimbabwe, do you feel the same?
I think the difference is there are some things that have worked well in South Africa. Your institutions are very strong. The functional separation of powers, legislature, the executive and judiciary, very strong. You have had 2 presidents who've come and gone. That's progress. Mandela came and went. Yeah. That's progress. Mbeki came and went. That's progress. Zuma is going. Maybe not now, but next year he'll be gone. In Zimbabwe, we've had 37 years of one man. That's a problem. Now, there are lessons to be learned from Zimbabwe. For example, in terms of radical economic transformation. Very important. There is no alternative in South Africa in terms of radical economic transformation. There's no alternative to a land revolution in South Africa. We need a land revolution in this country. We need a radical economic transformation in South Africa. However, here's the lesson from Zimbabwe. Don't allow a good idea to be corrupted by a few. Don't allow a good idea to be abused and used by a few people to empower themselves at the expense of the majority. So radical economic transformation is a good idea. A land revolution in South Africa is a good idea, but if you're not careful, a few people, an elite, will use those slogans to empower themselves. A few individuals will use those slogans to empower their families and individuals at the expense of the country. That is Zimbabwean tragedy, in the sense that the land reform program was a good idea, but only a few people got farms. There are people with multiple farms. Not only that, the land reform program in Zimbabwe was used as a political tool, where if you don't vote for me, I take the farm back away from you. So land became an instrument of political patronage to maintain power, power retention strategy. So if you're not careful, the ANC will use radical economic transformation as a power retention strategy. The ANC will use land revolution as a power retention strategy. That should not happen. The land reform program in South Africa, radical economic transformation in South Africa must be above party. There must be a program for the DA, a program for IFP, a program for the EFF. So which means when the ANC is removed from power, we continue on the same trajectory to the promised land.
I'm going to press pause on this interview. We've got to take a break. We are going to continue, though. Please don't go anywhere. Arthur Mutambara, our guest here on Morning Live. I hope you're enjoying this interview as much as I am. Do stay tuned. We'll see you with headlines after this.